This is inland wetland meetings for Tuesday, June 9th. It's around 7:30, and we're doing this through Zoom. We're not at the meeting room. And I guess, I don't know if we'll be able to do introductions to everybody, could we, or?
Everybody can see the names, so we haven't been.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone can see the names? Okay.
Mhm.
So I guess we'll just go down to the agenda. Assume everybody has a copy in front of them. The first portion says the correspondence. We do not have any. For new applications, we do not have any. And for receipt, we do not have any. But for discussion, we have a property known as 329 Smith Farm Road. It's a proposed affordable living facility with several buildings and 92 parking spaces. The project seeks a permit to work in 30,435 square feet of wetlands in the review area, with no direct activities to take place in the wetlands or watercourse. The majority of the property is currently comprised of wooded area. Is there anyone on Zoom for this property?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. I'm Attorney Tim Hollister from Hartford. Andrea Gomes, who is also on the screen, is my colleague, and we represent Gyroscope Development, which is represented here by Carol Martin, who is in the upper right of my screen, and Bruce Whitaker, who is just below me on my screen. They're the principals of Gyroscope. And our technical team that will be speaking tonight is Brian Baker, is our professional engineer, and Bill Kenny is our wetland scientist. Also on the call, on the bottom of my screen is Paul Bailey, who is our consulting architect. So we have three slides. And Brian, if I could ask you to screen share the first slide.
Jack, do you need to enable me? It says, please.
Participant.
I see Brian on my screen.
Yeah, he's trying to screen share.
Oh.
Which
yeah, you have
us...
to. You have to share the content, everyone, and you can do it right from your app. There shouldn't be any settings that don't allow people to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I have to.
When I go to click screen share, it says host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, hold on, everyone. Let's see. I wonder why that would be. I don't know why that would. Meeting settings. Can you try that again?
There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Oh, no problem. Sorry about that. It must have been default to check to be off, which is weird.
So we're gonna do the actually, you want the site plan up first.
Correct.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Not yet.
I don't see any site plan.
No, do we have to push share screen too?
No, it should only be him.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just him. Should be able to share the screen.
Oh, there we go.
Yep, now we can see something.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah.
We have a good number of people in here, so it's probably just going to take a little while for everything to do that.
Okay. Thank
Definitely,
you,
Jack.
Thank you. This is the site plan. I think you all know that the property is just northwest of Route 1, Smith Farm Road being the street on which the property has frontage. It is actually a total of 6 properties that have been assembled, one of which is the extension of Neenan Street, which is before the town meeting itself for abandonment. That's only 0.2 acres of the total, but it's an assembly of 6 parcels. There are 2 existing and occupied homes, which you can see at the lower left there. Those are not part of the application, and they will remain after the development. So the overall development plan is 7 buildings, 6 residential buildings, and a community building, a total of 46 units. And in terms of the wetlands application, as you look at the site plan, I would summarize the relevant features are that there is an intermittent stream, maybe a perennial stream, but a stream that goes along the corner of the site plan that you're looking at. And then there is a wetland soil in the northeast corner, the upper right of the site plan. Probably the most important thing is there is no direct impact to a wetland or watercourse. No filling, no grading, nothing within a wetland or watercourse. Within the upland review area of upper right, we're proposing temporary construction activities. Remember, an upland review area is not a wetland. It's the area adjacent to a wetland. So we have about 0.7 acres, 30,000 square feet of proposed activity in this area. And Brian and Bill Kenny will explain that in a moment. In terms of application materials, you should have the bound May 4th application package and the site plan set, which are basically unchanged since we submitted them a little over a month ago. We provided to Jack, and I believe he forwarded to each of you last week, some additional materials that are basically intended to anticipate and answer some questions we thought you may have. Your town engineer, Bob Brinton, had provided some comments on the stormwater management report, and Brian Baker responded to that. I believe it was 4 brief comments. We did some additional wetlands flagging. As you look at the site plan in the upper right, the Neenan Street extension was not originally part of the site development plan.
It gets to
Back in January when the development process was initiated. So we took it upon ourselves to go back out there and place 4 additional wetlands flags. And Bill Kenny evaluated that and found no additional impact. So Mr. Kenny produced a supplemental letter that addressed the wetlands flagging. And then finally, we had Carol Martin and Bruce Whitaker commissioned a so-called phase 1 environmental report to make sure that there was no contamination, environmental condition of concern. And basically the report came back that there is no such issue. And we gave you the narrative and the main appendices of the phase 1 report, and then a supplemental letter that dealt with one very small spot of residual pesticides back from when this property was in agricultural use, but again, determined to not be a significant impact. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Baker to go through the site features, the topography, and the stormwater management, and then he'll be followed by Bill Kenny, who will give you the wetland survey and the impact evaluation. So Brian and Bill, go ahead and take it away, please.
Thank you, Tim. Brian Baker here. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm also a certified professional in erosion and sediment control and a certified professional in stormwater quality. We're at Civil 1 with offices in Woodbury, Connecticut. We prepared all the site plans for GDG. So I'll give you a brief overview of the existing conditions and then the proposal. So what you have in front of you is an existing conditions map that shows the wetlands delineation. Property line outlined in green here is a 4.05 acre property. As Tim had mentioned, this sliver of land here is the Neenan Street right-of-way. that's in the process of being abandoned, which we'll use for access. Currently, there is one existing house here on the parcel shown along Smith Farm Road. Approximately 3/4 of an acre of the property along Smith Farm Road there is open lawn area, with the remainder area in the back being wooded. As far as topography, you have a high point sort of in the center of the site here around elevation 117. And then the site gently slopes both to the east and the northwest and to the southwest with grades of about 3 to 5%. So very moderate grades, so easily developed. And the fact is that there is no drainage that comes from off-site into the development area. We've got a high point, so we can deal with all of our drainage on our own site. There are wetlands soils that were flagged in the eastern corner here. As shown, those are wetlands flags 1 through 18. These 4 flags in the Neenan Street right away, the last 4, 15 through 18, were the ones that were added by Mr. Kenny after the Neenan Street parcel came into the fold. And then in the northern corner of the property, flags 15 through 22 here were flagged and located. You see the 100-foot upland review area in this red dashed line. We also have a 100-year and a 500-year floodplain that's associated with the Trout Brook that flows off-site here. It's off-site just to the north. We're proposing no activity within either of those floodplain areas. The upland soils on site are a combination of Agawam, Canton, and Charlton soils. Those are hydrologic group B, which are considered a well-drained soil with groundwater elevations down deeper than 80 inches below the surface. So these soils are perfectly suited for infiltration techniques for stormwater, which is what we're going to propose. Besides looking at the soils mapping that was available, online from the USDA, we actually went out and did 17 test pits of our own, which confirmed these deep sands and gravels and good percolation rates for the soils for our stormwater design. As far as existing utilities, currently along the frontage, there is no water or sewer, but we do have a water main that ends over here near Whitewood Road, which we're going to extend to service the property. And then the gravity sewer line, in this case on the plan, if to the right, which would be the east, is Boston Post Road. About 300 feet east of the property is the existing sanitary sewer line, and we're going to extend that up the Smith Farm Road shoulder in the right of way, and we'll be able to get gravity service for the sanitary sewer for the site. So now let's go back to the site plan. As Tim had mentioned, we have 7 buildings. There's 6 multifamily residential buildings and a community building in the center of the property. We have a total of 46 units with 92 parking spaces. So we have 2 spaces per unit provided. Access will be through a private driveway across from Neenan Street, the existing Neenan Street that's paved, up the Neenan Street right away and into the property, the private driveway. We have very moderate grades on the site, so the entire driveway and circular roadway within the site have grades of 1.5 to 2.5% slope, so very moderate grades, pretty flat overall. We do have an emergency access drive, which will be reinforced grass, turf, that would be just north of this northern building D. That was at the request of the fire department. So that would be reinforced turf. It can be mowed should it need be. But that provides a secondary access, egress out of the site or into the site in the case of an emergency. Talk a little bit about the erosion and sediment control plan and the drainage plan. Pull that up. So here you have sheet C 2.1 of your plan set. That's the grading, drainage, and erosion control plan. What we did, what we always do when we look at erosion control plan, we look to the DEP 2002 erosion and sediment control guidelines. In those guidelines, it states that any time you're dealing with a drainage area of 1 acre or less, then silt fence would be the appropriate measure for erosion and sediment control. In any case where, as I mentioned, we have the high point in the center here, so any of the drainage areas that flow back towards the wetlands or towards Smith Farm Road are all less than an acre, and therefore we've proposed erosion and sediment control as a geotextile silt fence. Additionally, in the area where we are closest to the wetlands in the regulated area, we are going to back those up with staked hay bales. Additional measures for erosion and sediment control, which are typical for a construction site like this, would be a construction entrance, so stabilized rock construction entrance, hay bale filters or 6 silt sacks for any of the catch basins. And we've also shown temporary soil stockpile areas that would be encircled with silt fence during construction. Just as a side note, when you're looking at a site as far as development goes, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and the sites that make me nervous are the steep sites that have silty soils, that have a lot of drainage area that comes from off-site. That's where you end up with your potential for soil transportation and erosion. We have none of those conditions here. We have well-drained soils. We have flat slopes. We have no drainage area coming from off-site. So from an erosion and sediment control standpoint, we certainly don't expect any issues from development of this site. As far as stormwater management goes, again, in that case, we look to the DEP 2004 stormwater manual, as well as we've been incorporated some of the guidance from the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center. So what we've done, we have a combination of things to deal with the drainage from the site. As mentioned before, because of the extremely well-drained soils that we have, we're trying to promote as much infiltration of the stormwater as possible. So basically, we want the post-development flows to mimic pre-development. So what we have now out there is a wooded area that drains pretty well. So we want to get all of our stormwater filtered and back into the ground. And we're doing that through a combination of measures for the building roof leaders. In the wetland regulated areas here, we have rain gardens, again, designed to hold and infiltrate water, expose it to vegetation from the roofs. We have pervious pavement in the parking spaces here in the southern portion of the site. In addition to that, we do have some catch basins, which should any of the drainage bypass any of the pervious spaces, we do have catch basins with perforated pipe, which would get that water back into the ground. Under this entire section of pervious pavement and the driveways, which is shown in orange here, we're proposing an 18-inch deep stone reservoir for stormwater treatment. So basically that water is going to go filter through the pervious pavement, through a sand filter course, which is installed under the pervious pavement, and into the stone reservoir where it's held and infiltrates into the existing soils. Down in front of the site, we've taken the roof leaders there and put them in an underground infiltration bed along Smith Farm Road. So that'll handle any of the impervious surface associated with these two buildings D. So basically all of the impervious surface in this area here that would have the potential to flow back towards the wetlands is all being treated in some way, shape, or form, either in the rain gardens or the or the pervious pavement and the stone bed underneath. By doing that, we'd be able to make sure that there's zero increase in stormwater runoff, stormwater flows back to the wetlands area from the site from pre-development to post-development. Talk a little bit about the, highlight what is really your purview as far as the wetland regulated activity. We've got a map here which breaks that down for you. Okay, as you can see in the back here in this eastern corner, we have the wetland soils. Again, this is the portion that was extended by Bill Kenny recently. So this is your wetlands line. This is your red dash line is your 100-foot regulated area. This area hatched in orange. So this would be first area of regulated activity. That equates to about 20,000 square feet of activity, a little less than a half an acre in the upland review area. You can see that activity is for the two rain gardens, which is what you want to be adjacent to the wetlands or in the regulated area typically. The two rain gardens, a portion of this building B and building C, along with the finished grading behind them. Small section of sidewalk in between buildings B and C, and even a smaller section of pervious pavement. You see these corners touch into that 100-foot regulated area. So that's the activity in this section. And then in the northern corner of the property, associated with wetland flags 15 through 22, you can see the two floodplain lines here. No activity in that area. The orange activity within the 100-foot, again, similar to the previous one, and previous activity includes two rain gardens, one for building B, one for building A here, small portion of the buildings themselves, sidewalk. There is no pervious pavement or any other paving within the regulated area over here. And just to be complete, we noted that the existing water main in Smith Farm Road crosses over Silver Brook here and stops past this 48-inch culvert that goes under Silver Brook. So we're going to be extending from this where the water service currently ends, and that first 50 linear feet or so of water main extension in the existing Smith Farm Road would be within the wetland regulated area. So that would simply be cut and excavation of in the existing paved road, installation of the water main, and then backfill and repaving. So that would be a temporary disturbance. Just as in my professional opinion, based upon the soils that we have here, the way the site is laid out, the fact that we can control all of our drainage here, that our proposed design and activity won't have any negative impact on the adjacent wetlands or watercourses. To give you an idea of scale, as far as the size of the property in relation to, Trout Brook and Silver Brook that come down north of the property here, the overall drainage area that comes down through Silver Brook at this point is 1.9 square miles. Just about 1,200 acres drains to this point here. Our total site at 4.05 acres, which we're not even developing the entire site, would equate to 0.3% of that total drainage area. So a modest drainage area in comparison when looking at the overall drainage area in the area. So again, we don't believe we'll have any negative impact to the wetlands or the adjacent stormwater system in Smith Farm Road. With that, I'd certainly like to turn it over to Bill Kenny, and he can talk a little more in detail about the wetlands themselves and what he found on site and his opinion of the design.
Brian?
I can stop share. Bill, are you gonna mute yourself?
Sorry. Thanks, Brian.
You got it.
Good evening. My name is Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates. We're located in Fairfield, Connecticut. I am a professional wetland scientist and soil scientist and landscape architect. My firm was retained to help with this project in a number of ways. We assisted with identifying and mapping wetlands on the property, then inventory and assess the wetland habitat and other habitat nearby. And then also to assist with the design of the project so that it could be designed in such a way to avoid adverse impacts to the wetlands or watercourses that are on the site or off-site. In addition, some of the detailed design work that we did was we put together the planting plan for the project, which I will share with you shortly. I have two maps that I'm showing here. One is on the left-hand side of the screen is a snapshot of the town GIS map, and in red is the project site, excluding two lots, the Neenan Street right away and another parcel right there. But this is generally the property. We have Trout Brook, flows from the east and then comes across and connects with Silverbrook, and then Silverbrook continues west and eventually enters Indian River downstream. And the site, as been discussed, the site is relatively level, and the soils, as Brian has indicated, are excellent soils for drainage. The sand and gravels have great porosity, infiltration rates, and the site, due to that, and due to the relatively gentle slopes on site, the potential for erosion on this site is very minimal. And the watershed, as Brian indicated, is relatively small, because as he noted, there isn't acres and acres of offsite land that are contributing water to this property. Water that's flowing nearby is just that, it's flowing off-site from other off-site areas and not flowing onto the property. Associated with the Trout Brook in the northeastern portion of the property, so you have a wetland on the northeastern portion side that borders that the Trout Brook flows through. It's a typical red maple swamp, and it extends onto the site here, and approximately 10,000 square feet of wetland in this area. And then that, as the brook flows around, the wetland follows that around off-site. And then where the brook connects at the north of the property with Silverbrook, then the wetland becomes more of a floodplain wetland, influenced by Silverbrook, the water flows of Silverbrook, more than Trout Brook at that point. And that's where the floodplain starts to come into play. And there's just a very small area of wetland that extends onto the property here, right at the north corner of the property, and that's less than 1,000 square feet of wetland. And then as Silverbrook continues to the west and then flows under Smith Farm Road via culvert, just northwest of the property. In addition to the work, Scott Stevens, a soil scientist, originally flagged the wetlands on the property, not including this Neenan Street right-of-way. He did that in January of this year. And when we conducted our work, which we did in April, I reviewed the wetland mapping that he did, which extended from the Neenan Street right-of-way, these two areas. I reviewed his work, and I agree with the boundary limits that he marked, and so we're in agreement with that. And then in May, returned to the site just to add this additional area, flag this additional boundary area along the Neenan Street right-of-way. In addition to the environmental work that my firm did, which focused on ecological conditions, wetland conditions and other ecological conditions, as Tim noted, that a phase 1 site assessment was conducted by GeoQuest of Rocky Hill, and they did find that that there was no issues with relationship to environmental to contaminants, and everything was no remediation is needed, and everything was below any type of state standard. On the right here is a planting plan that we prepared for the project, and on the left is the plan, the drawing that Civil 1 prepared showing the regulated areas. And so there's 3 regulated areas shaded in this light orange, one in the eastern portion of the site. And regulated areas, these are upland regulated areas. They're not wetland areas. They're areas that fall within 100 feet of the wetland that are going to be disturbed as a result of the proposed project. And there's about 20,000 square feet here and 10,000 square feet in the north portion of the property. And then a couple hundred square feet or less down here off site with the water main. So we looked at the development for the potential to have an adverse impact on inland wetlands or watercourses. And in summary, we find that the project will not have an adverse impact on inland wetlands or watercourses or the functions that they provide. And it's for the following reasons: that one, there's no activities proposed within wetlands at all. There's no crossings, no fill, no disturbance to put a utility line or to build a road or a driveway or stormwater outfall or anything like that. So there's no activities proposed within any wetland. So either during construction or after construction, there won't be any disturbance of wetland or loss of wetland area. And so the only potential for an impact would be from activities occurring outside the wetland. And so we look closely at those activities and focused on the potential for impacts during construction, what we call indirect impacts, activities occurring outside the wetland that might somehow affect the wetland. And during construction, the primary potential for an impact comes from soil erosion and sedimentation. And this is really one of this site, due to its gradient, relatively level, due to its soils, sandy and well drained, due to their watersheds, relatively small, that the potential for soil erosion on this site is very low. And when you combine that with the proposed soil erosion and sediment control measures that have been designed by Civil 1 and will be maintained throughout construction, it's our opinion that impacts to the wetlands from activities that occur outside the wetland, from activities that occur in the non-wetland regulated upland review area, that there won't be an adverse impact during construction from construction activities in those non-wetland regulated review areas. So then we looked at the potential for indirect activities or indirect impacts following construction. And similar to during construction, it's related to stormwater management. But at this point, we're looking at after the site the soils are stabilized, Pavement, buildings are completed, landscape is installed. What's the potential for stormwater runoff from the site to adversely affect a wetland or watercourse? And due to the design, the stormwater management plan that's been developed by Civil One, and with the plan being designed and will be implemented to town standards and to state standards for both the control of the quantity and quality of stormwater runoff through a variety of measures, through the rain gardens that are proposed behind the buildings in the north portion of the property, 2 rain gardens, and in the southeast portion of the property, 2 more rain gardens for water from the roof of the buildings. And due to the porous pavement that's collecting water from the driveways and parking areas, and then subsurface recharge chambers in the western portion of the property, collecting roof runoff and some runoff from paved area, walkways and so forth. It's with those measures in place, and with those measures being designed in accordance with the state standards for water quality treatment and peak discharge control and volume reduction, it's our professional opinion that the project will not have an adverse impact to the wetlands from stormwater runoff after the property is developed. So in addition to those mitigation measures, the soil erosion and sediment control measures during construction and the stormwater management plan after development, there are some additional mitigation measures that are shown on our landscape plan that help to ensure that the project will not adversely impact wetlands and watercourses. As you see here, a couple things I want to emphasize is that in the areas where the property borders the wetlands, and so it's the southeast portion of the property and the northern portion of the property, we're going to be, where there's temporary disturbance to put in the rain gardens, these areas are going to be planted with native vegetation, revegetated with native vegetation. So these darker green areas, this area will remain as forest, undisturbed. And then this area, these areas with the darker green lines, the rain gardens, will be revegetated. There'll be native meadow vegetation will be established in the rain gardens to protect these areas and the forested area from future intrusions, say during landscape maintenance from people mowing the lawn or other activities. A proposed split rail fence is proposed that will follow the boundary of this area to ensure that there's no encroachment with a lawnmower in the future. And so that's in the southeast corner of the site. In the northeast corner, or in the northern portion of the site, it's very similar condition. We'll be restoring portions of the upland review non-wetland regulated area. Again, native meadow grasses, meadow plants, grasses, and flowering plants will be established. And again, a split rail fence will be installed to prevent intrusions into that area. There's an existing feature that's also very helpful to help with protection in the future in this area where Trout Brook and Silver Brook are just off-site to the north and northwest. There's a significant existing stone wall that runs here. And then we're also proposing a privacy fence that will be right here, and planting of evergreen trees here. So there's quite a layered system of privacy fences and split rail fences and rain gardens and existing stone walls, good layers of protection for the wetland areas. Lastly, I'd like to note that the vast majority, nearly all the ground cover shrubs and trees that we're proposing on the plan are native plants. So we really like to try to work primarily with native plants. The few places where we haven't is For example, with evergreen trees where we're doing some screening due to deer browse, we often will end up using a spruce or a green giant arborvitae, which are not invasive, but they fare better with deer browse. So we do use them in those situations, and because they're not invasive, we think that's a good solution. But the remainder of the trees, shrubs, and ground covers throughout the development are native plants. So it's for those reasons that it's our professional opinion that the project will not adversely impact inland wetlands or watercourses and their ability to function, and that's for both areas that are on site and off site. If you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
I have a question about the,
Thank you, Bill. Oh, go ahead.
I got a question about the pervious asphalt drive, I guess it is.
Yep.
I don't know who that'll be for, but why won't the sand and salt clog it up?
When you have pervious pavement, you actually don't use sand for sanding for any snow. It's typically we're calling for a liquid de-icer. Typically, calcium chloride is used. The other advantage you have, so it does need to be vacuumed, swept twice a year. That's typical maintenance for pervious pavement. I found that works and keeps it clean. Again, there would be no sanding done on the site. Additionally, because of two things, the fact that we have relatively flat slopes here, as I mentioned, 1.5 to 2.5% driveway slopes. There's not, you won't have potential for a lot of slippage. So as long as we do snow removal, that should take care of it. The other thing is that pervious pavement itself, because it allows for porosity down into the subsoil. University of New Hampshire has found that those areas actually don't collect snow nearly as much as standard pavement areas, because they're actually allowing some of that temperature from a subsurface to come up through the pavement area itself. So that's typically, that's why you don't have clogging issues. But it does have to be maintained and swept and vacuumed typically twice a year. And that's called out in our maintenance schedule.
Is this system more likely down in the south versus up here?
No, actually, they've been installing and testing and monitoring it since at least 2005 up in New Hampshire, and had no issues with it. They've refined and modified the details and the guidelines for installation over the years. The current document, there's a 2014 specification from the UNH Stormwater Center for installation, and that's what we'll be following. They've actually found that they've actually tested the stormwater post-development, and they found that this treatment removes 99% of total suspended solids and 99% of hydrocarbons. So it's a very efficient treatment measure.
Because I know in the winter, when I go on my snow gets caked onto my car, within a month in my garage, I'll have 1 inch of sand after the snow melts. That's what I understand, how you're going to keep the sand off the impervious material.
Yeah, I mean, there will be some that travels in from offsite, certainly into the parking areas, but that's why immediately in the spring, after you get your last snowfall has happened, you don't expect any more. First thing you do is you go in and sweep and vacuum those out. Vacuum out that top course. I mean, if you do, I mean, it's, part of our stormwater implementation plan or maintenance plan is that all the measures that are shown on this site plan are maintained in proper working order. So if you had a section that clogged and had to be cut out and replaced, you're basically just replacing that surface layer of pervious pavement. Below that, you've got open stone and then a sand filter course. But maintenance has not been an issue. Again, from what they've seen for research up in as far as New Hampshire.
Okay. Did units have basements?
They're all slab on grade.
11 grade. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, Jim Ewan has a question, but he has no audio right now, so he's going to call me, and I'm just going to play it over speakerphone, and hopefully we can hear everyone.
Okay.
All right, Jim, go ahead.
Okay. I have a couple of questions on what is the cutout in the middle of the site plan? It's like a vertical cutout. Let's see. You want me to share the screen here? I can grab the share again so I can point it out to them.
Might be somebody else's property.
Jim, do you mean this spot in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean that keyhole, correct? Yeah, Jim, we can hear you faintly. Are you talking about the keyhole in the back of the property? Yeah, that's what he's speaking about.
Yeah, that's part of the property to the north. The Khan and Ali property. So the property actually juts into this piece. So that's an out parcel, basically part of the parcel to the northeast.
You might have to speak a little more into the phone, Jim, please.
You couldn't acquire?
That was property you couldn't acquire?
That's correct.
On which page, Jim? Jim, which page are we looking at?
It's on
Page SV.
So that is okay. The survey, hold on. Yes, I've got the survey up, SV.
Mm-hmm. And what's your question, Jim? He's asking about a civil road on SV. He might be referring to Neenan.
No, there's a former location of Sybil Road indicated in the middle of the parcel. So there was an old road right away there. It must have been abandoned at some point.
Did you hear that, Jim?
No, I didn't hear it.
He said that road was abandoned at some point, the Sybil Road running through the middle of the property. It was most likely abandoned a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, Jim's got one more. Sorry, Leslie. Sheet 2.1.
Yep.
Yep, we're going to sheet 2.1. Building B in the corner is what? Southeast corner, building B is within 50 feet of the wetlands?
Right here, you're right at 50 feet. You can see that 100-foot setback line. So that's right at 50 feet, that building corner.
Did you get that, Jim? Can you say that again?
Yeah, that building corner is right at 50 feet to the wetlands. You can see the 100-foot dimension there, and right halfway through is that corner of building B.
So about halfway to the wetlands is the corner of building B, so about 50 feet in the upland review area.
Right, so it is within 50 feet of the wetlands, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I believe that was his question. And Jim, do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, that's it for Jim. Thank you. Jim, feel free to call me if you have any other questions that you realize. Oh.
Leslie, you got some questions?
Yes. Regarding the native plantings, is there who's responsible for maintenance, and is there a maintenance plan? And if this was all already submitted in the email attachments, I apologize, I had a hard time opening it.
You want to take that, Bill?
Sure. The one question about the submission, you're referring to the planting plan itself?
Yeah, the plan and maintenance, schedule of maintenance, and will be responsible for it.
Right. So the developer will be maintaining the property themselves. Actually, Carol may be able to speak to that, but they do a wonderful job. She's involved with other properties in the region, and they do a great job with maintaining their properties. So they have very good control over that. At the moment, we haven't put together a maintenance plan for this as of yet.
Okay, I think we'd appreciate it if you did and you submitted one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
These are apartments, not condos, correct?
Yeah, Commissioner, this is Tim Hollister. This is a rental development.
Okay,
Scope will be responsible for managing everything. So this is not individual ownership or even a condo association. There's a landlord, and the landlord will be responsible for the plantings, bonding, the erosion control bond, making sure everything takes and is maintained.
okay.
Thank
I got one more question about, spillage of oil from the cars. Is there any kind of separator on site before it goes into these catch basins, or just goes into the pervious asphalt?
It actually goes into the pervious asphalt, and then there is a sand filter choker course. And that was something that's been developed over time, again, with the University of New Hampshire. If you look at the detail here, that gets trapped or filtered through this filter course. So you have the pervious pavement, a stone choker course below that, and then this 10-inch sand filter is where the majority of that renovation occurs.
So
Okay.
all these roads are pitched, they're not crowned, they're pitched inward towards the catch basin?
Correct.
Right, because
Inward towards actually just along the catch, just inside the catch basin in the pervious paved area.
right, so they're not crowned like a typical road on the drainage will go on either side of it. It's
Correct.
the opposite.
Right. It's pitched to drain into these, which you'll see often in developments like this, and in where you have small access driveways, or in commercial parking areas where the lanes will all pitch and the drainage or catch basins run in that area behind the parking spaces. So when you get out of your vehicle, you know, the water's it's running behind you versus just having to cross it to get into your unit.
So the sidewalks are not flush with the asphalt, to be a 6-inch curb?
Correct. There's 6-inch curb there, except for, you know, where we have a handicap.
Right,
space.
yeah, that's,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
that's standard, right, okay,
And one more question.
go ahead.
Snow plowing, this, it looks kind of tight. Where would the snow go? Where are you planning on putting it?
We've actually got this entire area. It's a pretty large area behind the community building, this large green area for snow storage. So that would be your area for snow storage, and again, would be well outside the about as far away from the regulated area as you can get. We're right in the center of the site there. So that's where in any real severe storm where you had to pile snow, that's the area we put it.
Great. Okay, thank you.
If building B, because I see they're staggered, right? If you pulled it forward and staggered it the opposite way, how many feet would you gain away from wetlands? Because you said it was 50 feet to wetlands at the corner right now, right?
Correct. That was based on, so it's actually from the exact corner right now to the wetland line is 47 feet.
So if
Okay.
you,
The jog in that building is,
I think it's 2 feet,
oh, that's it?
Right.
Brian.
right, it's a 2-foot jog.
So if you brought it forward, it'd be 49, that's it.
You get 4 feet, right. You get
Okay.
4 more feet.
Yeah, because I saw the scales 1 inch to 30, but it's hard to tell. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to sort of wrap up our presentation if I could just have about a minute and a half, if that's okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you. First of all, I was remiss earlier. I didn't thank Jack Demersion for his help in getting us to tonight. So thank you, Jack. The agenda item for the commission tonight, I think, is to decide whether this is a significant activity. And I think if you look at the definition, I'll just run down the criteria. There's no deposition or removal of material in a wetland or water course, no change in a water channel, no change in the natural capacity to support fish or wildlife, no causing of turbidity, siltation, sedimentation, no diminished flow, no pollution, and no destruction of a unique area with scientific or educational value. So those are your criteria for significant activity, and we don't think any of those are present, as you heard from the presentations of Mr. Kenny and Mr. Baker. So the request is that you find that it's not a significant activity, which would, and also, of course, no adverse impact, which would give you the basis to move this forward.
But a lot of people in town have a lot of concerns about Indian River for flooding. I know the water is not directly going there, but it is going underground. And I would think it will flow into Indian River, correct? Underground.
Brian, you got that question?
I don't know exactly how the groundwater contours flow in this area. It's certainly possible, but if you're talking about a flooding issue, you're dealing with surface stormwater. You're not worried about your groundwater runs slowly, you know, to the tune of, you know, a couple of feet per day under the soil itself. So your flooding issues really or entirely have to do with surface stormwater, which the best way to mitigate any flooding is to get the water into the ground. And we're not, the fact of the matter is right now, let's say 5 inches of rain were to fall on the surface of this property and soak into the ground, into the woods. We're not making any more rain. We're not changing the drainage areas. So if 5 inches were to fall on the surface now naturally and soak into the ground, when we're done with development, 5 inches falls on the ground, it's going to soak in through our infiltration systems and again get back into the ground, so there won't be any underground surface water change to either the local wetlands or wetlands further away. This is exactly what you would need to do to deal with areas where there is potential flooding.
But
is to
same thing. It's the same
promote
thing.
infiltration.
Same thing with the rain gardens.
Correct. The rain gardens, we're actually have less flow. Let's say you're in a 100-year storm, right? And let me just pull up my numbers here. So in a 100-year storm right now, water that flows back, surface water, which is what you're worried about, that flows back towards the wetlands area and ultimately into Trout Brook and Silver Brook and on down. Now you'd have 4.9 cubic feet per second from the site of flow. When we're done with development, under post-development, that includes all the measures that we have, including the rain gardens, you'd be at 4.2 CFS. So you have a 0.7 CFS
Gotcha.
decrease. So you have less flow post-development in those big storms when you're worried about potential flooding based upon the design. You have 0.7 by 4. It's about 14% decrease in stormwater flows in that 100-year storm.
Jack, did anyone email information concerning about this?
The only call I got was today from anybody concerned, and it was from the Davises. If you can see their house on the image on your screen right now.
Right.
The only question that they had was if this could somehow affect their well. I pointed them in the direction of the sanitarian, Brian Slagoski, because he was more suited to answer something like that. They were concerned with the changing of the sheet flow, if that would affect their well. I talked to Brian today about it. He said it's very minimal, but that is the only call that I received since they submitted this application at all, speaking anything against it. But I honestly can't even say it was, they weren't up in arms about it. They just had a simple question and it was answered.
Since you guys are doing a new water service, do you have any issues just putting a curb stop on their side of the property when you do this, in case something goes wrong with their well? I don't mean connect the water to the house, but a curb stop.
We would have no issue with that. We'd have to obviously work it out with Regional Water Authority, whatever
Right.
they want to do. The normal protocol is to put a TY or potential connection location there. So yes, these basically extension.
If you could put an extension to each house right at the property line, just so in case something goes wrong with their well, since you're putting in a lot of underground water.
Yeah, we would discuss that with Regional Water, and if they weren't adverse to it, we'd have no problem.
Yeah, they
Providing
shouldn't.
with potential.
I don't think they should have an issue with it. They will get more money.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Other than that, there was no input from anybody that I know of, at least.
So any other concerns out there? If not, they could bring us back a maintenance schedule. See if you could speak to Regional Water Authority about doing those 2 curb stops. Anyone else has any other questions or things for them to bring back?
Okay, we have those 2 items, Mr. Chairman. We'll take care of those.
If there isn't anything else, I guess that's it for this.
If whoever's screen sharing could kind of bring us back to the homepage, thank you.
Okay, the next meeting is July 14th, for everyone to know that. So if you could get that information by then.
Would the commission consider passing us on with those as conditions that we submit them to Jack? Just make that suggestion.
Right, just send them to Jack and then he'll email us the information. You know, and then we'll see.
So you'd like to hold off on voting until those stipulations, or would you like to vote including those stipulations depending on the approval or denial?
I would like to review the plan a little bit more, just in case we have other questions. I don't know
Okay.
about the other commissioners.
Yes. Yes, an agreement.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so it seems like most agree. So we could put the voting off of, Rick, you said the 14th was the next meeting. I don't have the schedule.
Yeah,
in
July
front of me.
4th, July 14th is the next meeting. I don't think we need a public, meeting. I don't see a sign off. I don't see that kind of impact.
Mhm.
So it's just going to be a standard meeting in July. Is that
Sure thing.
okay with everyone?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, so we will continue this on the June 14th meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner.
This makes a whole lot more sense. Is anybody opposed to that? Is starting it that way?
I don't oppose it. Usually the summer I work later, so I might have a harder time getting to 7:30, but I mean, we could try it. I don't
Does
have a
anybody else
problem.
have any input? Do they prefer one or the other? Because I know Lynn and I have talked, we think 7 o'clock makes more sense. I know John said the same thing. Anybody else have a preference?
So if you want, we'll try 7.
Yeah, so let's try that moving forward. I'll start putting 7 on the agenda so everybody knows, because obviously the time on the agenda is what we have to do.
Right.
So I feel like 7 o'clock kind of just makes more sense.
Okay.
All right.
Is that good with everyone?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and that's pretty much all I had. Other than that, I've been
Okay.
doing a lot of zoning stuff.
And then next meeting is July 14th. That's it. So we just need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion? We have a second? Second. I assume everyone's in favor.